This is the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast. Thank you very much for joining us. It's always greatly appreciated. And if you do enjoy these podcasts, please do not forget to rate us on your favourite podcast platform. It always does help us. So today we're at Newport Pagnell, and amazingly, I've just found out, is that it's 70 years of Aston Martin at Newport Pagnell. Coincidentally, we're at Aston Martin Works, and around the table we have Paul Spires, the president of Aston Martin Works, and Steve Waddingham, the AML historian. Hello, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, morning, Gary.
Aston Martin here for 70 years. We're in 2025. That's flown by, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate, really. I mean, there can't be many factories in the world that have had that longevity of 70 years being owned by one brand, and really for Aston Martin being on this site, so many of our iconic cars have come out of here. I wouldn't say all the iconic cars, but the majority of the cars that people refer to when they think about Aston Martin, all built here, in this relatively modest village, really, in Buckinghamshire.
How many up to Feltham, up to the end of Feltham? How many cars would Aston Martin made? There's Steve.
Well, so pre-war you've got just under 700. So pre-war production less than 700, and then Feltham, if you add together the DB24, the Lagondas, I mean, you're in low thousands in total. And then really things got going. And of course, even what we class as Feltham cars, it gets very complicated with Feltham cars because some of them are actually not built at Feltham at all. The way to correctly think about this, the seat of power for Aston Martin was at Feltham until it moved here in the sort of mid-60s formally. But I think really from 55 onwards, Newport Pagnell started to become very important within Aston Martin, and lots of things happened here. Basically, the two factories were running alongside each other, but this was by far the bigger one of the two.
Well, absolutely. I remember before Gaydon come online and the volumes they're producing along St. Athan as well. I remember the 10,000th Aston Martin.
Yeah, I remember that.
Did you remember that?
Red V8,
Red V8, was it?
Yeah.
I remember the press photograph.
About 84.
Yeah, 84.
84?
Yeah.
Victor
And you
Gauntlet.
think the first car was made in 1914, so it took from 14 to 84 to build 10,000 cars.
Yeah.
Who was with Victor Gauntlet? There was
John Martin. Lionel Martin's.
Yeah.
I sold the car, actually, fun enough, later in its life.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I've dealt with that car for some reason. And as you say, was it York Red from memory?
York Red, yeah.
Because, of course, the photograph's black and white, but there's an amazing photo with Victor and John Martin and all the workforce gathered around it.
It was.
I was talking to someone the other day who did his entire career at Newport Pagnell, and I remember talking to him way back in the 90s and asking him about Feltham, and his reaction was, "Oh, I don't know, I didn't work there." So, and that was it. That was the end of it. So we never talked about Feltham until really not that long ago as a brand, when we kind of rediscovered our early history, because really this was the centre of the universe for many of us for many decades.
Well, it is very much still considered to be the spiritual home of Aston Martin, isn't it?
Yeah, I
mean, as you drive in, you see the signs, the home of Aston Martin.
Yeah.
I remember that used to annoy Jim Wyman of the AMOC. For reasons I never quite understood, but I used to make him rage with that fury, the home of Aston Martin. Perhaps he was from the Feltham era, I don't know.
Absolutely is the home of Aston Martin, and the community around us are also, hence the sign as you drive into the town.
Yeah.
The community are very, very proud of Aston Martin being here for such a long time, and when you walk up to Costa Coffee with your Aston Martin jacket on, people kind of talk to you and say, "Oh, you're from Aston Martin, what do you do?" Because they are so invested in us being here on this site.
I would see it as like Buckingham Palace. There were palaces before Buckingham Palace, and you could look at the royal family nowadays, and they're dotted around. They live in Windsor and Sandringham and Balmoral, but everybody thinks of the palace as being Buckingham Palace, and it's a bit like Newport Pagnell, really. So a lot of people, they still think of Newport Pagnell as being massively important part of Aston Martin.
Well, Steve and I have had a wander around Newport Pagnell and up and down the high street, and you could have your see some businesses up there with Aston-derived names. You can get an estate agency or get your hair cut and come back very much Aston Martin branded.
I don't know whether AML Builders are still going, but it's a building company called AML Builders.
Lagonda Drive and things like that.
Lagonda Drive.
Yeah.
I think Gaydon's got Vantage Close, is it?
Yeah, House and Howders. I think, there are, weirdly...
There's some royalties kicking around here.
I think there's a development now near Gaydon called Valiant, which is nothing to do with our car called the Valiant. It's to do with the aeroplane. But of course, it'll end up having a double meaning because of the car as well. But it really is it's got a huge history at Newport Pagnell for many different things other than just cars, but by far the car's the biggest thing.
Absolutely. So we'll be covering Newport Pagnell over a number of episodes because it's going to be a huge topic. But as I said, we are at Works, so let's focus on Works. So in 1955, Aston Martin came here, and in 1964, the service department, Aston Martin Service, opened up.
If you think about a bit of Aston history for a minute, 62, 63 was the last couple of attempts at doing Le Mans. So at the end of 63, that was really it for motor racing. And at that point, the only things left at Feltham were the service department and the actual race car facility. So the sort of racing activity was always centred at Feltham. And when that ended, that was it. The only thing remaining then was the service. So David Brown obviously realised that the sensible thing to do would be to move that up to Newport Pagnell. And there were a few people that were due to come up here, but I think in reality only a handful ever made it to actually moving up to Newport Pagnell. So really they started the service department here pretty much from scratch.
And was it a service department, as we know, a service department definition?
Yeah, I think because even
so few cars made then.
Yeah, I mean, even pre-war, the old service department was a big facility. It was a major part of the business, so it always has been, and certainly that's what was here, repeated here as well with, in the mid '60s. And you have to remember that would have been in the height of, DB, the end of DB4, DB5, DB6, and all the other cars that followed it. And this was always a busy place, and still is, isn't it? I mean, turnover is pretty impressive.
Absolutely right. I mean, you have to think. You look at the service schedules for DB4s and 5s and 6s, and then like every 6 months, and you look at some of the early histories on some of these cars, and they come back to Newport Pagnell for some pretty big work being carried out on. So, the service department. I think Sir David was a bit of a visionary when it came to this. That by delivering a very high level of service to your customers, you retained the customers, because actually he did a really, really cracking job of kind of putting us on that path of the fact that Aston Martin was a high quality vehicle, but it had a high quality backup service behind it. And by having a big service area here, where they could return the cars to the factory for any work that needed to be done, was part of that kind of strategy of retaining our customer base, and something that really coming full circle to where we are now. This company is basically, the foundations are customer care. If we don't get the customer care side right, then everything else falls apart.
No, yeah.
Customer care is absolutely kind of the cornerstone of this business, and we try to deliver a high quality service to our customers, exactly the same as we used to do in the 60s when Sir David founded the service department.
So it was Aston Martin Service then, and then at some point it became Works Service. Can anyone write us on that?
When I joined the company in 1990, I joined the parts department, which was attached to the service department.
Yeah.
And it was known as Parts and Service, or Service and Parts. And then at some point, I can't remember exactly when, but I would say mid-90s, the name Works Service came about, and we had a logo design for it, and that ended up being a badge and a windscreen sticker and a key ring, and those things became highly desirable. So, to have a car with
the name of the place just became like Works Service, didn't it? didn't become Aston Martin Works, because it was Aston Martin Service beforehand.
Yeah.
Then it became
Work
Service.
Like
People knew what it was.
Almost like a brand, really.
Yeah.
And it's, even now, it's quite a coveted thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
to see that
absolutely.
Works
People want the shield. We sell people wanting to send them key rings with the shield on, all that kind of stuff. And we've reinvented the shield actually for our 70th anniversary logo as well. And I think, Work Service kind of came into being because it developed. Kingsley developed the business in the 90s doing 6.3.
When did Kingsley join? Can we remember?
Something in the 70s, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. That's
he was here when you was here, Steve?
But Kingsley worked up from the shop floor upwards, and then ended up, working in service. But I think that's, to be fair to Kingsley, that's a conversation to have with Kingsley one day to let him tell his story.
But he did develop this business. We think about it.
Very much.
We did 6.3 litres. We did, shooting brake virages. We did four-door virages. Stretch cars. We did all those specials under the Aston Martin. Work Service branding. Yeah. Those kind of things you can't underestimate. The impact of this business and the way that it was developed to the mothership.
You've got to look at it as an in-house coach building facility in the 90s.
It's almost like Q. Has kind of become now for Gain. Aston Martin Works Service was that kind of Q division that did all the specials. For people mainly overseas. So again, you think about the level of commerce that all of those cars brought to UK PLC, because they were quite expensive vehicles at the time. It's quite a big part of the whole Aston Martin picture.
We got things like the V600 engine. And then at that point, this flourished because we had the V600 conversions, and then also DB7. Don't forget, DB7 came along and was built differently to the cars that were being made the opposite side of the road here, which were still being made up until the year 2000. And it's like, okay, we've now got a press seal body shell car. What can we do to it? But we came up with around rear light conversions and the rear seat delete option, so you could make
sports exhaust.
How many cars? I'm thinking, Paul and I, we used to deal with brand new car customers on DB7, and the amount of times we used to do a handover here, and quite often the car would be built at Bloxham, shipped over here, had the rear lights fitted, and whatever options,
and a PDI,
In
those days, PDIs and first services, all that kind of stuff. And again, there was the provenance. A lot of customers to that provenance having their pre-delivery inspection carried out at Aston Martin Works at Newport Pagnell, because again, it added to that provenance. As I've said before, dealers are great, but some dealers come and some dealers go. And, in these cars don't disappear. So when a car's kind of 50, 60, 70 years old and it's got a stamp of a dealer that no longer exists, it doesn't have the same level of provenance to be able to say, I know that. That's Aston Martin Works at Newport Pagnell. They did the PDI. They've done all the servicing all the way through for the last 30 years. Wow. That adds a level of provenance. I'm not saying it adds value to the car.
Yes.
It certainly adds a level of provenance.
And do you see some of those cars coming back sometimes with, and they said, look at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That stamp.
Yeah, absolutely.
It must be a magic moment, doesn't it?
It's fantastic. Sometimes I pick up a service book out of a V8 and you kind of look and you see the signatures, of some of these service reception engineers we had in the past, and you see, God, Bob Kingsley, fun enough, have signed some as well. It's amazing. You think, God, it really is it's a moment in time that you don't get anywhere else.
Yeah, it was. I'm so pleased I witnessed it, because it was magical. Seeing this in it thriving back then, it really was. This part of the company carried the mothership, through those difficult years of the early 90s. You have to remember, in 92, we only made 46 cars for the entire year. And the reason why we kept going was because we were doing 6.3 conversions on the garage. And I think we probably did more conversions than we built cars.
How did that come about? Somebody had a glass of wine that evening going to work the next day and thought, this would be a cracking good idea.
Well, I think you were involved, Paul, weren't you, for 6.3?
I did a little bit of development driving on 6.3. It wasn't my project, but we had done, HWM. We did a couple of special cars for customers who disappointed with the performance of their virages. So we put the rose jointed coupling on the A-frame. We did actually do a couple of 7-litre engined virages as well for customers. We did brake enhancements with different wheels and tyres on the car. So it was all kind of, everybody's working to try to keep these cars kind of relevant at the time, and it kind of came together out of some of that work, really. The 6.3 litre, which was a cracking car. I mean, I managed to knock the spoiler off of one, I remember, at Silverstone, because we didn't have the bump quite right, and every time you hit the brakes, the front would dive massively. So we actually wore the front spoiler off to the point where it actually fell off the car. But it had been going around. To be fair to the car, it went around all day. But there were interesting times. I mean, Virage was a difficult car for Aston Martin to deliver, and it didn't have. I mean, at the end of the day, the Virage was supposed to be an equivalent to the V8 coupe. It was never designed to be an equivalent to an X-Pac Vantage, but I think there was an expectation from customers.
Yes,
it was an X-Pac Vantage.
It had a difficult thing, didn't it? It had to fill both.
So spots. It had a difficult birth, really. And then we all got behind it and enhanced it. And then the 6.3 litre program came out of Aston Martin Works, and that really kind of set it really on a very good path.
I seem to remember as well, the 6.3 was so good that it actually encouraged Ford to go ahead and give us the money to develop DB7. It was that critical. This
it's surprising how these things can spin off.
These guys are fighting for survival. Let's give them what they need. Let's do DB7, and and then we picked up DB7.
Yeah, just give them the money for Mondeo dashboard, and
and then we had Supercharged Vantage, which was again a car that on paper shouldn't work, but my God, that's an amazing car,
isn't it?
Yeah. And I'm not going to compare myself to Jackie Stewart, but obviously Jackie Stewart doing Vantage at weekends. He took Vantage away and was doing all the ride and handling stuff up in Scotland. And
he was a director, wasn't he?
He was.
Jackie was a director.
So Jackie used to come here on a Friday. You pick up a Vantage from here, from Nick and Walter, and leave his Scorpio, which on the odd occasion I used to use as well. And take off in that, and he was doing ride and handling. I mean, for Aston Martin to have Jackie Stewart doing ride and handling on that car, that's why the car's as good as it is. I mean,
so he had a genuine input.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
it wasn't just a PR.
No. He had a genuine input.
It's quite funny, isn't it, to think back. You would see Jackie Stewart walking around here on a regular basis, and he was absolutely world famous as one of the most famous racing drivers of all time, and he was a regular fixture around here.
Yeah, and that came from his relationship with Walter Hayes. It was all done really as a bit of a favour. But that car is as good as it is because of all the people involved in it. When we looked at it, we used to struggle to keep Virage cool because of the under bonnet temperature so high. When I looked under the bonnet of a supercharged Vantage with those two superchargers and all the intercoolers, I thought, boy, crikey, this is going to be a bit of a thing, isn't it? And you know what? You can sit in traffic all day, and it won't run hot or anything. It is a cracking bit of kit.
Yeah.
Surprising how the Virage morphed into something quite great, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it was a huge change. All the rear suspension was changed for the Dion rear suspension, all new brakes, all new cooling system. I mean, apart from, I think, the doors and the glasshouse area, pretty much everything else was new.
I feel a bit sorry for anyone listening. It's got a Virage because
there's nothing wrong with Virage.
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with it.
I think as Paul said, it was expectations.
It was the expectation, the customer expectation. I think.
Yeah.
At that time.
And we did a lot to the ordinary Virage, because if you remember, there was a thing called a CSP program.
Yeah.
Customer Satisfaction Program.
Yeah, we did.
And there was, I forget how many, there was over 25 of them. And it was simple things like there was nowhere to hang your coat. So one of the CSPs was to fit a coat hook. And then there were things like changing the A-frame on the back suspension.
Yeah.
And all these things were all done under warranty.
Fuel cooling systems.
Yeah.
Massive fuel cooling issues.
Carbon canister upgrades, all sorts of stuff. Yeah. And the cars would come in for a service, and we'd go, right, what does it need doing? And we would have a list of CSPs to add to it. And all that was done. So actually all the cars are out there now, all had all this stuff done in period.
And beyond that, to be fair. I mean, we were learning on the job as well. I think our knowledge of how to look after the cars and keep them on the road and make them robust was minimal then. And we learned very, very quickly. Of course, now we're talking, whatever it is, 30 years on.
Yeah.
Some of the last virages, because there was a point in time where production just stopped of the coupe. It was that's it. If the body shell hasn't gone past a certain station on the factory floor, then it goes into storage. And we ended up with about 9. We had 9 leftover coupe body shells. I think we must have completed a few. There must have been more than that. We must have completed a few as a standard virage. And then with the last remaining 9, somebody came up with the idea of let's do a limited edition.
LE, yeah.
And we did the Virage LE to mop up those last 9 body shells. And that was what the edition was, 9 cars, because that's how many cars were left over. And they were all done in the same colour scheme.
Green and tan, had that strange grille.
Yeah. Designed in-house by somebody on the shop floor.
Yeah.
It's a competition to win a coat. And you had to design a grille.
Oh no, I think the Virage nowadays is a very nice car. A friend of mine has one green with a magnolia interior, and it's just lovely. It's lovely. So away from the Virage, I think we've got enough material there for a Virage podcast. But so let's move away back. So we were Aston Martin Works service. When did it just become Aston Martin Works? Because that's how we recognise it now, isn't it? Anyone, any ideas?
Probably 2008, I think, when it kind of changed to be Aston Martin Works as such.
Was Works Service, was it a separate company? Or was it just part of the Aston Martin Group, just part of
Aston Martin Group? I think it must have come in 2008 when production ceased.
Yes, that sounds about right, doesn't it? Yeah. I always feel like I've been involved with this building one way or the other, but things just kind of gently roll in and just slowly change, don't they, and evolve. I always say when a new model comes out, when I see one here with number plates on in the workshop, that's when it feels real. When you actually see things like the first time I ever saw a DBX with number plates on it, which didn't belong to us, it was in here, got mud on it, where it just coming off the road with a customer driving it. And that's when it all feels real. There's a real customer's car in the workshop being serviced, being PDI'd to go out to a customer, whatever it may be. And the same with all the other amazing cars that have come through here in the last few years, including all the specials. And I think things like 177.
Yeah, we look after more 177s than anywhere else in the world.
Was that the record, like 14 in one day?
Yeah, I think it was about that. I mean, we had 70 the other day. So, yeah, we have a lot of 177s come to us from all over the world. And, of course, you obviously can't underestimate the amount of work that we also do overseas as well, because we have our heritage support, our global heritage support mechanism, where we actually send our technicians out to certain parts of the world to actually service cars in the field. And, again, that comes back to the provenance that people want to put on their cars. They want to have our technicians go out to various parts of the world to put that Aston Martin Works provenance onto their cars, particularly for the important cars like 177s and cars like that. But it's open to everybody. People are fortunate in the UK that you can drive up here, you can wait to have your car serviced, you get an Aston Martin Works service stamp in your book, you can have a nice coffee, overlook the workshop. And on the modern cars, we're on fixed price servicing, so it's no more expensive to come here than to go to anywhere else. So you have that benefit. But for those customers that are overseas, we do send our technicians. In fact, we've got 2 who've just come back from Singapore from servicing some cars literally this week. We have probably every week there's between 2 and 5 people out of the business servicing cars outside of the UK. So for those people that are listening from other parts of the world, don't think that because you're not in the UK, you can't have that enhanced experience and the benefit of having an Aston Martin Works service. The kind of heritage support came into being because many years ago, one of our customers thought it was a very good idea to put a couple of his cars into the back of a Hercules and overnight send it into Cranfield. And it arrived at Cranfield in the dead of night. There's no one around. Big Hercules turns up, throws 2 Aston Martins out with a handwritten note saying, send these to Newport Pagnell, and took off. Well, you can imagine the difficulty that causes with, HMRC, the CAA with aircraft coming in unannounced and everything else in between. So we thought it was probably a good idea for us to go out to him with his collection of cars than for him to keep sending Hercules across and deposit them in the dead of night. So that's kind of how that kind of started off. But again, it comes out of everything with this company, everything with Aston Martin Works is driven by our customers' demands and needs.
You started here in 2012.
Yes.
2012. So there's been a number of changes over the years, and I've been a visitor here in the 90s. Looking at the site now, looking at the main building, although it's been improved and modernised, the soul still seems to be there. It hasn't been ripped out, has it? It just seemed to be that same Aston Martin Works, service vibe to it, doesn't it?
I think it's really important, Gary. I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's great for us to have fantastic buildings, but it's a people business.
Yeah,
and we have to have that level of passion and dedication from the team here to deliver that high quality product to our customers. It's what our customers demand and expect, and that's what we deliver. And in order to keep the quality of people coming through the business, we have to give them a really good, high quality, safe environment to work in. You can't deliver a high quality product to a customer from a messy, dirty workshop. So it's really important for us that we keep the place in tip top condition.
It is immaculate, isn't it? We'll have a look around the workshop hopefully later, but it was
I think where we're sat is one of my favourite buildings. I'd actually say one of my favourite buildings, full stop. We're sat in Olympia, which is the distinctive building with the curved roof.
Yes.
Which, typical Newport Pagnell humour. It's nicknamed Olympia because it looked like the old Olympia building in London, which is where the motor shows used to be. But, I just love this building so much. And I knew it for so many years as it used to be, which was looking a bit sorry for itself. And it was just used for various, workshop purposes. But to now see it like it's become over the last decade or so as a beautiful restored building that is the home of the heritage sales operation here, I just love it. And if anything happens to me on the home front, I'll be putting a hammock up in here, and this will do me because I just love this building.
So lovely cars. I mean, what was the idea? What's the thinking of having the Olympia site for heritage? Did it just seem to offer itself up? It does seem to, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it made perfect sense to us to restore this building back to its form, in fact, better than its former glory, to be honest, and utilise it mainly as a heritage sales facility. And we're lucky that we've got some fantastic examples here for sale at the moment. But we use it for lots of different things. It's a real multi-purpose facility. It's a bit like the Swiss Army knife of Aston Martin, this place, because we've done dealer training here. Last year we did dealer training for Vanquish and for V8 Vantage. We've had fine dining for 250 people in here. We've hosted the Aston Martin Owners Club Concourse seminar here earlier on this year, and we've done literally everything in between. It's a facility where you can move all the cars out, and within probably 2 or 3 hours, it can look completely different. You can do product launches, use it as a film studio.
I remember the days when you used to have the auctions here.
Auctions, yep.
Yeah, I mean, the overnight, the place was transformed, wasn't it?
Yeah, the auctions were really, really good fun. Very hard work, but a lot of fun having the auctions here.
So, how far do you go back for working on the cars, servicing the cars? Is it DB4, DB2?
No, anything with an Aston Martin badge on, we will service here.
So
we have
turns
done
up
pre-war, in fact.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Felton cars, we've got DB Mark III here, having an engine rebuild. We literally go.
So how does that? I'm interested in this because how does that work in your workshop? So one guy's working on a V12 Vantage S, and the next project coming in is a DB2. So I mean, that one person, I say, have the skill set for both cars.
It's a great question. So we have different divisions within Aston Martin Works. So we have a heritage workshop, we have a modern workshop, we have a parts department, we have a body chassis build area, we have a body shop, we have heritage sales, we have modern car sales. So we have all these different facets and a trim shop. And because it's a big business, we have about 100 people on this site. Everybody is specialist in their own particular area. We don't have people that are trimming cars one minute and building engines the next. So we have specialists in every single area, which is really important because obviously, when the trimmers are taking the trim on like a DB5 apart, they can look at it and see what's wrong because they are so adept to looking at that. And in fact, one of our trimmers has been here for 37 years. So he's now retrimming cars he trimmed in the first place. So, it's got that depth of knowledge. So our heritage team work on the heritage cars. The modern team work on the modern cars. The modern cars are so complex with plugging in the computers to diagnose things, whereas the different skill set in heritage, they really don't they don't work as, you can't have a technician, to be fair, that's tuning a DB4 1 minute and working on a DBX the next minute.
No.
They're completely different skill sets. So we're fortunate to,
But your man doing the DB4 work would also work on a DB24 or would work on
absolutely heritage, because obviously
a Virage or V8.
Because all of those cars, right up until you get to kind of Vanquish, really, are the technology involved within those cars are relatively similar. So it's a different type of skill.
If one of your apprentices come in, would you say, right, would you give them the breadth of knowledge to start on a 4 all the way up to modern stuff, so you have a broad experience?
We have done. I mean, it's interesting with the
Because that'd be fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting with the apprentices because sometimes they join us very young, and they don't necessarily know where their skill sets are. So we had an apprentice that started off with us in trim, and he was okay as a trimmer. But then on Saturdays, I noticed he was coming into the panel shop and working with the panel beaters on a Saturday. And so we kind of took him to one side and said, it's great you wanting to kind of come in on Saturday, but why are you kind of getting involved with doing panel beating when you're here as an apprentice doing trim? He said, well, I really kind of want to do panel beating. I said, well, why didn't you put your hand up and just say? He said, well, I didn't want to let anybody down.
Oh, bless him.
Yeah. So we actually took him out of that and we gave him an apprenticeship in the panel shop, and now he's one of our top mild steel guys, actually. And you just we try to work very carefully with the apprentices and generally people within the business, and put them in. And there's no point putting a round peg in a square hole. So we try to make sure we use the right people who've got the right disciplines in the right areas of the business. And sometimes we move people around and it doesn't work out because they actually find that actually what they thought that area of the business was like, it doesn't meet their expectations. So we move them back. So again, it comes back to the succession planning and the agility of the business to be able to actually look at the team and actually develop them and give them a really fulfilled work-life balance.
Jump to the future, but I'm also going back to the past, and I'm going to mention electric vehicles. So, dear listener, do bear with me, don't switch off. Works, or yourself, Paul, were very much behind a DB6 electric conversion, like a cassette type thing. And that was quite a few years ago. And I think that was long before electric vehicles, I'm trying to think of a pun there, sparked. We'll go with that. Can we talk about it? That's quite something different for Works to do, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, we were way ahead of the game. We were just so far ahead of everybody on this. At that point in time, it looked like fossil fuels were going to come to an end, and EV was the only option. Now, what we didn't want to do was for all our heritage cars to become museum pieces. So we had to come up with a way of us actually enabling our customers to use their cars in all environments, all around the world. And actually, it came on the back, I just remembered, it came on the back of continuation. So I originally proposed this. So DB4 GT Zagato was supposed to be the world's very first dual drivetrain car. So it came with an internal combustion engine, and it came with an EV power plant as well, and they were interchangeable. So in order to develop that, we took this DB6 and we wanted to have a completely reversible drivetrain. When I started on the project and we started talking to engineers, they thought I was completely mad and said it's just not achievable. There's no way you can achieve this. So we came up with a scheme with this cassette drivetrain, and I was absolutely, it was absolutely laid in concrete. They could not cut or drill another hole in the chassis because I wanted it to be fully reversible. Because in my mind at the time, EV is now, but in 50 or 100 years' time, there'll probably be something else that will power these cars. And if we destroy these cars, you can't get it back.
That's a fair comment.
So we wanted to have it fully reversible. So we actually came up with this drivetrain. And as the project went on, and I said I wanted it to be this speed, this acceleration, etc., etc., the technology came towards us and actually overtook us. And in the end, they said, well, we can deliver a car that'll do this, this, and this. And no. I want a car that mimics the original car. Ideally, what I want is for a driver to get into this car and drive a car and not know it's EV. So we had augmented sound long before people were doing it now.
Okay.
So you'd actually drive a DB.
So it wasn't a silent DB6?
No, it wasn't. The car we built was.
Yeah,
but
yes.
actually, the if you like, there were 3 stages in the program. There was the program we delivered, a stage 2 and a stage 3. And stage 3 was basically a car that you would drive and you wouldn't even know it was EV. That's how complex it got. So we built this car and it was great. And we took it to Monaco and we drove around the Monaco Grand Prix circuit and people used to look at us because you could see the car, but it kind of went as it went past. And that was a pretty cool thing to do. And I think that car, we actually converted that car back to internal combustion engine, and then we sold it. And I think that is I believe it's the only car in the world that has ever been internal combustion engine, converted to EV, and then converted back into ICE. And it's amazing when you think, we're talking about Aston Martin doing this, a relatively small.
And that's quite a while back now.
It was. I can't remember which year it was, but it was quite a while ago now. I mean, we were right out there, and the cassette drivetrain was a really cool. It's a really cool concept of having this. It's
a nice way to explain it, actually, isn't it?
Well, it was a cassette. We actually didn't get to that point because we never took it to the next level. But it was going to be clothed in carbon Kevlar as well, because obviously the issue you have, particularly with EV cars, is crash. You look at it. When you put an EV drivetrain in an old car, you don't have the crash structures you do when you build a completely new car around you. So we had to make it super, super safe because from a product liability perspective, we had to be right out there. We're not, nothing wrong with some EV, but we're not a small outfit where we can just kind of put a couple of batteries from a Tesla in it and say that'll go, because if somebody hurts themselves, it has a massive impact on the whole Aston Martin brand. So we delivered that whole project in a really short space of time. But for little old Aston Martin or Aston Martin Works in Newport Pagnell to deliver what was a groundbreaking, globally leading project was
quite something, wasn't it?
It is quite something, yeah. And I'm very proud of the team that delivered it.
Say groundbreaking for a small Aston Martin, a small Aston Martin Works. Another innovation or another development was, and you hinted towards this, was the continuation cars.
Mm.
And I think I am right. You were one of the first to do this. Aston Martin, one of the first to do these.
Yeah, I mean, certainly to the volume and the quality and the way they went about this type of project. Yeah, nobody else had ever attempted it.
What was the first continuation?
DB4 GT lightweight we did.
And how did that come about?
So it came out of being because when I kind of took over the company here, I looked at the fact that we had all the skills on site to build a complete car, but we don't. And we couldn't build a modern car because the site's not big enough. So I thought it'd be really cool to kind of do some of my favourite cars. It's very indulgent, really. And DB4 GT lightweight is an iconic car. I mean, the first time that car came out, DB4 GT, Sir Sterling Moss drove it at Silverstone, and all the good and the great have driven it. Innis Island and Salvadori, great names. And it was a car that was an icon. It was a car that developed into Zagato as well. And so it was a car that I think, we as Aston Martin are very, very proud of. It kicked off that first car, GT, was the first car with Cowden headlamps that we did. So it's a great car. But we wanted to deliver it in a very structured manner. I didn't want kind of a couple of guys out the back with some tin snips, basically building cars in a haphazard way. So I proposed that we built 25 of these cars because we should have had 100 DB4 GTs for homologation, but we didn't. We actually built 75 cars. And, if you add up all the other cars and some that weren't even built, it kind of comes to 100. So we wanted to kind of, we tied up the back catalogue. So we built these 25 cars. And we went about it in a way that nobody else has ever attempted, because I wanted a real showcase for what we do here. I wanted a car that was a real standout. The people around the world would look at this car and go, wow. So we wanted the quality ethos of a modern car in terms of the gaps, the shuts, and the way that everything goes together. But we wanted to have something that was, identifiable as a DB4 GT. And simple things. So I won't go through every bit of the car that we did, but when we did the engine, so the engine alone, you can't take a DB4 GT engine and cut it in half to see what's inside of it, because that just They're too expensive and we couldn't do that. So we actually took an entire DB4 GT engine and we put it through a CT scanner. And we took out 1mm slithers throughout the entire, as it went through the scanner. I, with the engineering team, sat in a very darkened auditorium for basically 2 days, going through every millimetre of the engine. And when we found anomalies, things that we didn't like, we actually adjusted that and wrote then a CNC program to machine the engine blocks. So the engines are cast by the same people who do our Formula One engines. So it's a very, very high quality casting. So the way that the castings are even chilled is different to how it would have been done in the 50s and 60s. So it's a more rigid block, and it is a thing of beauty, an absolute thing of beauty. And the way that we wrote the program for the machining means that things like, I don't know, some owners of six-cylinder Aston Martins may have noticed you get a little bit of oil wetting on the exhaust manifold, and you cannot find where that oil's come from. You think it's coming from the gasket on the cam cover, but it's not. What happens is actually the drilling for the stud that goes through the exhaust goes actually a little bit too far in, and it breaks through the oil way. And it only has to be a tiny fracture, and you get a little bit of wetting, and you'll never fix it. We found this on a couple of engines. So we backed those out on the CNC machine. So we end up with this really, really high quality, and it is a thing of beauty. And organically, it just gives more power because the engine's stiffer. So it's that's just one. And we went through every single component. We basically took everything that was available off the shelf for DB4 GT, and we put it through a QC process. Even things like the fuel filler caps. Was the fuel filler cap correct? Was the finish of it? Was the chrome what we wanted for a modern car, for a new car quality ethos? And we either said yes or no. We had loads of new tooling done. The door handles that were available were made off of tooling from the 1960s that was basically worn out. But in order to invest into the tooling, you couldn't have done that for just restorations and for parts operations. So we invested literally hundreds of thousands of pounds into tooling, which enables customers with the original cars to have actually a much higher quality.
I'm just seeing the costs behind all this. It's quite scary.
Oh, the cost is the cost.
You must have been confident of selling these.
I was confident, yes.
You were confident.
At some point, you have to take the brave pill and put everything on the line, and we certainly did with this car.
Yeah.
And I'm very pleased to say that within 2 weeks we sold all the cars. In fact, we had so much interest in the car from America in particular. We could have sold all the cars into the USA, but I took a conscious decision that we didn't want all the cars to be in one market. So we actually spread the cars around the world. Because if we put all the cars into the US market, and the US market all of a sudden didn't like continuation cars in 3 or 4 years' time, I didn't want 25 cars come back to the market. So we actually took a strategic view of selling cars into Switzerland, Europe, Middle East, USA, UK. We had a list of about 55 people in the end that were interested in purchasing these cars. And we kind of worked with everybody. I mean, it's great. No two cars were ever the same.
Right.
We ended up going all around the world speccing cars with customers. It was a very, very successful project that we delivered. To be fair, we delivered it on cost, on time, and on quality.
What was it like when you fired the first one up?
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, you kind of take me back a few years there. So it was a Saturday night here, and everyone was working. We used to work, we worked very, very long hours. So Saturday night, everyone was here, and we fired up what we call PP1, which is the first prototype car, which looked the same as the 59 Le Mans car. We did the exact same color scheme with the stripes and everything. It was a replica of DP199, and literally I sat in the driver's seat and fired the engine up. And I said to our chief engineer, I said, get in. He said, why? I said, we're going for a drive. And we drove out the workshop here, and it was dark and it was drizzly. And our FD, I'm going to give you an idea of how enthusiastic we was. Even our FD was here on a Saturday night at 11 o'clock. And he jumped in our Focus pool car and followed us in case we weren't going to have any issues, but just in case. And I remember driving out of here, and I thought, this is a moment in time. I'm driving the first new DB4 GT that's been made at Newport Pagnell, the first new car Newport Pagnell for 10 years. And we drove up Tipper Street with the headlamps on, with the drizzle coming down, typical Newport Pagnell. And we drove up and we went up Chichley Hill, And it really was,
That's the moment. It's quite an atmospheric moment, even with the drizzle and headlights.
Yeah.
That was a time travel then, wasn't it?
Yeah. And we came back and, everybody, it was a bit like just one Le Mans. Everybody was like, the emotions were really, really high. And, to build a complete car like that was amazing, and all testament to the team. The team did just the most amazing job. And then 2 days later, we gave it to Jeremy Clarkson, which you may have seen on his program. And literally that car had a shakedown. We took it, that was a Saturday night. The Sunday morning, we were back here at 7 a.m. We went to Millbrook. We did a day's shakedown at Millbrook. And on Monday, it went to Jeremy Clarkson. He took it to Spain. And that's that car. And I have to say, that car has never, ever failed to proceed.
Yeah.
From the moment we turned the switch for the first time. Yeah,
that's something, isn't it?
That is really quite something.
Yeah.
And something, I'm proud of the team that delivered that whole program.
Yeah. And this gave you a taste for more continuations.
Yeah, I mean, the whole cycle plan had a number of cars built into it, which was DB4 GT, DB4 GT Zagato, and then DB5 Goldfinger. Again, that was a very difficult car to deliver. Very complicated car. Incredibly complicated.
Absolutely, yeah.
We worked very closely with Eon Productions. We had Chris Corbould, who worked on the last 15 Bond films, work on all the gadgets with us. I think it's an amazing project. I mean,
Well, you brought it to the festival a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a staggering car.
Yeah.
What attention.
It's staggering because it's a car that has got all the gadgets. It drives like a DB5. It's robust that retail customers, can put it in their hallway or go and shoot the guns or make smoke come out of it. It's a pretty impressive. It's a very impressive car.
May I just say, perhaps it's been said, a leader in this type of continuation vehicle, because I think it's led to other manufacturers to try and copy that. You're probably too modest, but I'll probably say that to you, sir. You started this trend or this industry.
We did. I mean, I think you're right. I don't like to say it because I probably am too modest, but we developed this within Aston Martin as a project at a very highly engineered state. As I say, this isn't a couple of guys in the back making a couple of odd cars every now and then. This was a proper production system with all the systems, processes, people in place that delivered an outstandingly high quality of vehicle, outstandingly high. And yes, other people have looked at it, and I think it's great if they want to follow what we've achieved.
Yeah.
We delivered, I say, 68 cars, all retail sold. They have no stock. They're all gone, and all those customers are enjoying their cars and loving the experience of having had a new old car built for them.
It's not just about cars for Aston Martin Works. Here 70 years, you're very much part of the community in Newport Pagnell. Can we mention COVID, which was 5 years ago? Aston Martin Works stepped in.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Yeah, we are an integral part of the community. And when COVID hit and the whole world kind of imploded, we didn't know where we were going to be. And we had a workshop here, and looking at the great work that the doctors and nurses were doing at the local hospital. And I was very conscious that most garages had shut down. There was no public transport around. And I thought, well, crikey, what can we do? And I thought, well, most of them drive fairly old cars because they're not highly paid people.
No.
And I thought, well, if one of them, if a doctor or a nurse can't get to Milton Keynes Hospital and save somebody's life, and we've got a workshop that's laid empty, that would be a tragedy. So I thought we had to step up and do our bit. So we basically opened the workshop, and we had the guys working on a voluntary basis, repairing and servicing free of charge the cars for the nurses and doctors in Milton Keynes Hospital to keep them mobile so they could go into work and save people's lives. So that's kind of part of that's what we did for the community.
That was well received, wasn't it? And I think the police.
We did.
You had a visit from the police. Spires.
Normally when we have a visit from the police, it's not a good visit for the police.
No, it's never good news, is it?
They're never good news. But yeah, I mean, amazingly, I think a lot of the doctors and nurses put on social media, that they were so grateful that we had, put their exhaust back on or fix their radiator hole in it. And we had some undercover police officers turn up. and they left some bottles of beer for the technicians who'd been working on the cars.
Fantastic.
Which I thought was lovely for them to do that. And everybody that we met, every doctor, every nurse that we met, were so super grateful. I mean, we were grateful that they were looking after the community and making sure that people could go back to their loved ones. But they were so grateful that we actually took the time to look after their cars. And we started off approaching them like HazChem people, with the white suits and the gloves and the mask and everything. And then eventually we got so used to it, used to wear masks and stuff. And I was walking through our reception, and there was a nurse there waiting for a car that was being fixed. I had my mask on, and she said, "Excuse me." I said, "Yes." She said, "I hate to tell you," they said, "but you're wearing your mask on the wrong way around." So we had whatever was the white bit on the back and the blue, which should be on the front, or whatever it was. So we'd all wearing masks the wrong way around. So actually, it wouldn't make any difference whether we wear the mask or not. But I'm quite proud that we did step up, that we did do our bit for the community, and maybe, just maybe, we managed to do our bit, and somebody did manage to go home to their
It must have been a surreal moment in the workshop, doing the workshop where perhaps Vantages, DB4s, V600s, all up on ramps, and then you see Focuses, Yaris's, Vauxhalls. I mean, it must have been strange.
And it was a proper, it was a bit of a wartime mentality.
Yes.
Because, people that came in here, they had to get back to work quickly. So, they'd come in and we'd kind of diagnose something, we'd order the bits, and they'd come back the next morning, we'd fit a new radiator or put an exhaust on their car. So it was really, it was real combat time.
I think you have to remember that these buildings that we're in have played their part in the First World War. They built ambulance bodies for the front. So, in those days, people were bringing in their big Wolseleys and Rolls-Royce limousines, and the bodies were being removed, and they were fitted with makeshift ambulance bodies. And those cars were then used to ferry injured soldiers back from the front line. So they played their part then. And then in World War II, this was a cinema. This building got converted into the local cinema. And then the building opposite, the 3-story building, even to this day, has got a flat section on the roof, which is where the lookout tower was. And that if there was an air raid, that's where the fire watches went up to watch for the whole town from the top of our building. So these buildings have played their part in the local community through 2 world wars, and if you like, the conflict of
COVID.
COVID.
You mentioned something, Paul, quite sweet earlier when we was chatting pre-podcast about a lovely moment when you was cutting the grass, when there were signs of things getting better. You just found that?
Yeah, so, I was here every day.
During the COVID.
During COVID, to kind of keep the lights on and look after all the doctors and nurses when they bring their cars in. And as things started to get better, I looked at the grass, and the grass got a bit long. So I got the lawnmower out and I started to cut the lawn. I was cutting the lawn, and a family wandered past, and the mother turned to the husband and the children and said, "Things must be getting better because Aston Martin now are cutting their grass." And I thought that was a kind of a barometer moment where actually people looked to us. They really did look to Aston Martin. When they start to see us coming alive again, that actually the world was getting better. Because it was pretty dark times.
Yes. So the Olympia building, strange looking building. Why is it here? Why does it look like it does?
Yeah. So the Olympia building is actually an old aircraft hangar. That was moved here in the early 1900s, covering the woodyard. So a lot of the bodies were made here in the early 1900s, made from ash, and the guys were basically outside in the rain and the snow. There's a little wooden hut here, and had all their saws and stuff. And in 1907, they built the grand 3-story production building, and so all the production guys were all nice and warm in there, and out here, the guys in the woodyard were out in the cold, and they went on strike, and they refused to come back to work until they were warm. So Salmon Brothers bought this old aircraft hangar, and then moved it here onto this site and put it up to put them in the warm, and they came back to work. So that was the kind of the main strike. And over the years, the sides have been filled in and the windows been put in, and it's been used for lots of things. But originally, it was to cover in what was a wood yard at that point in time.
Yeah, it's certainly been a few things over the years, but and the 3-story building was known locally as a skyscraper because apart from the church, it's the tallest building in the town, and that's why it had the platform on the top as an observation point. So yeah, these buildings are properly iconic. And there was also a building that's no longer here, sadly, but it was called the Black Hole.
Yes, got hit by a truck.
Yeah, I think the official name was the Auxiliary Parts Store, but it was known by all of us as Black Hole. And it was like this building, only it was narrower, longer, and taller, but it had the same sort of curved roof. And it was nicknamed the Black Hole because the roof was corrugated iron roof, and it got tiny little rust holes that had gone through completely. So when you walked in there with the lights off, it all lit up like a like a planetarium. You can see all these little speckles of light coming through, and that's why it's called the Black Hole. And a quick funny story: we used to hold all of the very, very slow moving spare parts, and often things like raw castings and unpressed panels and things like that. And every November we used to do a stock take, and it would go on for weeks and weeks. And yet the worst job was going in the Black Hole to count everything. It was absolutely freezing in there. So we used to get donkey jackets. We had AML donkey jackets to put on. And one of you'd be up a ladder and the other one would be with a clipboard at the bottom writing down the numbers. And a colleague of mine was at the top of the ladder, and suddenly there was a bit of a weird clattering noise. And we both looked at each other and went, "What was that?" Anyway, I don't know, but I think something's fallen off the back of the racking on the wall side. So it just disappeared completely. No idea what it was. So we just decided, being like 20-year-olds, that we'd just keep quiet and not tell anyone. So anyway, we forgot all about it. A few weeks later, a man came into the little parts counter shop that we had on site, carrying this rusty object, which he put onto the counter. And I think at that point, it all dawned on us what this was, because it was a seat frame for a DB5. And he looked at us and he said, "I found this in my garden when I was doing the roses, and I thought you might like to have it back." And we quickly checked to make sure that none of the bosses were around. I went, "Thanks very much," and kind of took it off him. Had the part number on a tag attached to it. And as he was leaving, he kind of turned around and he said, "I didn't need it. I've already got one of those," and went out and shut the door behind him. So to this day, we've no idea whether one piece at a time was falling out the back of the Black Hole and somebody managed to build themselves a car. But yeah, it was this site really has had some major surgery done to it to bring it up to what you see today, because it went through the wars quite literally.
Well, literally, yeah.
Growing the passion, sharing the stories. The Aston Martin Heritage Podcast.
Aston Martin Works, it has a very wide portfolio, very wide skills, and it goes beyond perhaps a perception of dealing with the older cars, the heritage side of things. You have a strong heritage side here, and that's to be championed. But beyond that, the future is very much for today, isn't it? For ongoing vehicles.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we are currently looking at EV strategy, because obviously
I was going to say about that.
Is EV. So looking at the EV strategy, we're always at the forefront of what's happening within Aston Martin as well. We had a Valhalla here the other day, and we do have some Valkyrie servicing going on today, and a lot of other special things that you can't necessarily talk about, but the company is absolutely at the cutting edge of what's going on within Aston Martin. When it comes to new technology, we embrace it, and there is a level of comfort and provenance, I think, from buying your car from Aston Martin Works here, at the factory, and having it serviced as well, no matter where you are around the world. We get people from all around the world that want to buy the car directly from Aston Martin. But yeah, we are continually working very closely with our colleagues at Gaydon to make sure that we continue to deliver that really high quality level of service to our customers, no matter where they are.
New or heritage for servicing or sales, all welcome. Having said that, if you want to bring your Hercules bomber, don't land it on Paul's lawn because you just cut the grass.
No, exactly.
Just make a phone call instead and they'll come to you.
Exactly, 100%.
Right. Paul, Steve, thank you very much.
You're listening to the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast. Discover more about the story of Aston Martin, the cars, the people, the history with the Aston Martin Heritage Trust. You're always welcome to visit us at our museum in Oxfordshire, so find out more via amht.org.uk.